In the northwest corner of South Vietnam, nestled among 4,000-foot high steep ravines and thick jungle foliage, rests the small valley of Khe Sanh. At this time in history, it is calm and peaceful. But from January 21st to March 31st, 1968, it was the scene of one of the most bitterly fought and highly publicized battles of the Vietnam War. For 70 days and nights, a determined group of 6,000 Marines and allied troops held out against a besieging force of 20,000 North Vietnamese. Was Khe Sanh worth it? Why did the U.S. military command feel it necessary to defend this story?
Many times I'm asked what part I think Khe Sanh will play in the history of our country. And it's almost impossible for me to evaluate it since I was so close to the situation. However, I can tell you a little bit about it, and perhaps the place we should start is with an orientation of its location and some of the features around it. Khe Sanh, as you know, is located 8 to 10 miles from the Sapone River, which is the boundary between and South Vietnam. It's south of the demilitarized zone and has around it certain hill masses which control some of the infiltration routes coming down in this general area. And of course, Route 9, basically the only road in this area, runs from the Laotian border, continues on through and goes almost to the coast of Vietnam. In about April of 1967, the battalion surprised an enemy element on this particular hill mass. And eventually it resulted in the Marines seizing Hill 861, 881 South, and 881 North. After these had been seized, it was determined that a small unit should be placed on Hill 950 in this general area here, so that when August of 1967 rolled around and I took over the base, I found myself with troops on 881 South, 861, and 950.
In the summer of 1967, the Battle of Khe Sanh was still many months away, but units of the U.S. Navy's Seabees are already at work on the airstrip that will provide the only link with the outside, while the Marines are busy digging trenches and building bunkers. The weeks that follow are relatively quiet. Marine units continue their patrol operations with very little enemy action. In December of 1967, intelligence sources indicate the start of an enemy buildup. 2 North Vietnamese divisions are assembling in the deep areas around the base. The communists could be preparing for a major assault. If the base is to be defended, it will have to be reinforced. The decision is made by General William C. Westmoreland, top commander of U.S. forces in Vietnam. The Marines will stay and fight. He is supported by the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Khe Sanh was an important outpost. If the enemy had taken this outpost, I think the province of Quảng Trị and the DMZ area would have been in jeopardy. The enemy had planned to take it as part of his Tet Offensive. At the same time, he had planned to overrun Quảng Trị City, seize and hold Way, and to roll up our defenses south of the demilitarized zone. If he could have seized that plateau, he could have run trucks with ammunition, logistics, and even conventional artillery into the Khe Sanh Plateau, and certain of our installations further to the east could have been made untenable. Now, we saw the enemy building up his forces in order to siege and eventually overrun Khe Sanh as he did Dien Bien Phu in 1954. The weather was very poor. In October, we had only 1 battalion there. In November, we increased it to 2 battalions. December, we kept 2 battalions there, but in January, we reinforced it with 2 more battalions, all Marines. We then put a Ranger battalion in there. I wanted to put into Khe Sanh enough troops that I thought could hold it against ground attack. But I didn't want to put more troops in there than we could supply by air.
Khe Sanh and Dien Bien Phu. The comparison was natural. In August of 1954, French paratroops had moved into the Viet Minh stronghold, then a part of French Indochina, located in North Vietnam. Bringing in heavy artillery, tanks, and equipment, they prepared for the Communists' attack led by the North Vietnamese general, Vo Nguyen Giap. But the French found themselves outmanned and outfought. They were surrounded, cut off from their source of supplies and reinforcements by a superior artillery, crippled by a lack of air power, and crushed relentlessly in Giap's powerful nutcracker. The end was inevitable. The French were overrun, forced to capitulate. The defeat brought an end to the Indochina War. 2 months later, the armistice agreement was signed at Geneva. Vietnam was partitioned, Laos and Cambodia neutralized. French influence in Southeast Asia collapsed. The Russian communists were quick to congratulate the victors, Ho Chi Minh and his brilliant General Giap. Now, 15 years later, the same General Giap is determined to repeat his victory at Khe Sanh. By January 1968, the stage was set. Inside the 1 mile by 1/2 mile perimeter of the Marine garrison were 6,000 U.S. Marines, a battalion of South Vietnamese Rangers, and a handful of Air Force and CB support troops. Burrowed in bunkers and hidden under the triple canopied foliage that covered the surrounding slopes was the largest and best equipped force ever mustered by the enemy, 20,000 North Vietnamese Army troops.
On the 19th of January, there was a recon patrol which had gone out in this general area north of Hill 881 North and ran into considerable trouble, and it really developed into quite a tense situation, but eventually we were able to get them out and brought them back to Hill 881 South. So the next day it was decided that we should go out and clean out this enemy force which had evidently come in the 881 North area. So we sent one of the companies from 881 South towards 81 North, and they banged head-on into what evidently was a NVA battalion. This was a day-long fight, and by nightfall they were still in contact in heavy action, and with nightfall coming on we withdrew them back to Hill 881 South. We had plans to go out the next day, but then on the morning of the 21st, about 0500 in the morning, the base received heavy mortar, rocket, and artillery fire. Almost simultaneously, Hill 861 came under attack from about a battalion-sized NVA force, and that no sooner got started than down here in Khe Sanh village, CAC unit came under attack by about a battalion. So we had three things going at once, and naturally my concern was with all of these forces which are around me. As you can well imagine, I began to become concerned that they might start closing the base. However, it didn't take very long to really upset me when, in a few minutes later, after this whole thing is boiling to a pot, that the ammo dump went completely up and there was rounds flying all over the place.
The siege is on. The North Vietnamese launch a massive artillery attack. The Americans counter with record airstrikes and artillery, and the B-52s start their aerial bombardment. U.S. commanders predict a major North Vietnamese offensive just before the Lunar New Year on January 30th, or just after it. This could develop into the biggest confrontation of the war. The weather is on the side of the North Vietnamese. Communist gunners time their attacks to take advantage of the mist closing in on the airfield that hampers American planes from striking back. January 29th. American intelligence reports presence of a 4th North Vietnam Regular Division in the Khe Sanh area, bringing the total estimated enemy strength in the area to approximately 40,000 regular troops. Half of these appear poised for the attack on the garrison. General Westmoreland positions his reserves of about 15,000 Army troops plus a 5,000-man Marine regiment at Phu Bai, about 60 miles southwest of Khe Sanh.
In early February, the enemy again tried to take the 861 complex. However, this time they made an effort on its twin sister 861A. The attack on that hill was repelled through the use of not only the supporting arms, artillery, air, but also, as with every other attack on the perimeter, by the organic infantry weapons, the 81mm mortars, 3.5 rockets, M79, machine guns, and mines, and every other weapon available to an infantry battalion.
February 10th. The North Vietnamese Communist Party newspaper boasts that the U.S. faces a defeat as disastrous as that suffered by the French at the Dien Bien Phu. There is growing concern over the fate of the Marine garrison, as the U.S. press also revives the specter of Dien Bien Phu. At stake now is more than a key military stronghold. The